Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. Today's special guest is a four-time premiership player at Hawthorn. We have Jordan Lewis with us as our special guest today. Hello, Jordan.
Hello, Fletch. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
As good as you can be, I suppose, in this current climate. We're not allowed to do too much at the moment, so hopefully this weekend we've got the pass to at least see friends and get out and do some stuff. It seems like it's been a while, but we've had one good thing. We've had the footy still on, so that's kept us a little bit sane.
Yeah, it definitely has. Who is your tip for the grand final on Saturday night?
Oh, it's for me, it's a flip of a coin. If I had to put $20 on someone, I think I would go Richmond. For a reason I've got no idea. I suppose if you looked at their last game against Geelong, albeit there was a few key Cats players that were missing, they tended to play quite well. And I think in terms of the conditions up there, that we've heard it's going to be a little bit dewy come the night time when the grand final is scheduled. So I think that dewiness and I suppose the chaos in which Richmond play would make it quite hard for Geelong to defend and play their own way.
It definitely will be interesting. So, of course, you started playing football in Warrnambool. What was that like for you?
Oh, for me, it was everything. I suppose anyone who's grown up in a country town or been exposed to a country town at some point knows that the football and netball on a weekend is what you live for and what helps you get you through the week. So my first memory of football was going to watch my dad play. He played. There was two leagues in Warrnambool. There was a Hamden League and a District League, and my dad played in both. But the time that I remembered was he was in the District League playing for a side called Dennington, and his brother played there, and also my cousins has since played there. So for me, weekends going to watch Dad play football at Dennington, and mixing with the young kids, and then once the game finished, we would be the first ones out on the oval, and all the parents would go inside and have a few beers to either celebrate the win or commiserate, and then we would stay out there and kick the footy until they turned the lights off and it was time to go home. So for me, they were fantastic memories.
Yeah, they definitely do sound like great memories. What sort of support is needed as a regional player compared to someone who's playing their junior football in Melbourne?
It's totally different, I would imagine. So for a kid growing up in the country, you've pretty much just got one team that you play for. Now, depending where you go to school in Melbourne and where you're situated, I suppose you've either got school football or then representative football and then maybe even club football. So there's multiple games that you can play. Whereas for me, it was really just one game on a weekend. I didn't have any school football, and there was no representative football that clashed with the home and away season, I suppose, from a country point of view. So for me, it was probably the right balance. It allowed me to play one game of football a week, a couple of games of basketball, and for me, that was more than sufficient to burn some energy that I needed to in those times. But yeah, it was. I look back quite fondly on the memories that I have of junior football.
Yeah, definitely is great memories. I played junior football myself, and they were definitely great memories. Who would have been
Who did you play for?
I played for the East Burwood Rams.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So I think Josh Gibson played there in his junior days.
Yeah, he grew up in Blackburn, I think it was.
Yeah, I'm the same. So
yeah.
Who do you think has been the best on-field leader that you've ever seen?
I think you probably the two guys that I've witnessed quite closely for a period of time would be Sam Mitchell and Luke Hodge. And I suppose we were lucky that yes they were great leaders, but we had a leadership group that you could arguably say could go to another club and potentially captain that side straight away. We were quite strong, and it just so happened that all of us were there at the one time. So we were quite fortunate to have Hodgie play predominantly in the back line, and he and Gibson were the two leaders down there. Sam Mitchell and probably myself would be the two that were around the middle of the ground, and then Jared Ruffhead and then Lance Franklin and probably Jack Gunson as well were the leaders in the forward line. So it's quite rare to have really strong representative in your leadership group from every part of the ground. But I think those two players in terms of Hodgie and Mitchell, my captains in my time there, stood out.
Yeah, they definitely are great players. What was it like playing alongside those players, especially given that you got drafted alongside Jared Ruffhead and Lance Franklin?
Yeah, it's funny, Fletch. I suppose when you're in the midst of playing and amongst all these great players, you don't realise at the time they are just teammates, and you challenge each other, whether it be on the training track or out on the field on game day. So I just saw them, whatever they were able to do and what would look like it was special from the outside. We saw it on a day-to-day basis. So for me, it wasn't that surprising, but you look back on my time and you see highlights, especially, you speak of Sirioli or even Buddy Franklin, and the stuff that they were able to do amazes you. It really does. So I think, you don't get too much time to reflect on your career once, when you're playing, but certainly once you finish and you catch up with these people and you have a beer and you get a chance to watch games from yesteryears and you see the things that they were able to do, you're quite fortunate to be able to say that I played with, arguably the best player in Lance Franklin, arguably the best captain in Luke Hodge, and probably the most special player I think that I've ever seen in certainly my time in Cyril Rioli.
They definitely are some fantastic players. Of course, what was it like when Lance Franklin went on to kick 13 goals in a match?
It was a funny sort of day, I suppose, because the weather wasn't really conducive to kick a big bat of goals. It was quite wet and dewy, and from memory, I think I kicked the last two to him, albeit the last one, his 13th goal, it wasn't a great kick. It hit the ground. I was just lucky that his talents were able to pick it up and snap it over his shoulder before the siren went. But yeah, it seems like we'll never get a big bag of goals like that again. So to witness his 100th goal in 2008 and then to witness him personally kicking 13 goals in a game against North Melbourne was, it'll go down in the history books as one of the great performances.
He definitely is a great player. What did you think about him moving to Sydney?
Yeah, I suppose for him, he wanted to test a new environment. He felt like that he needed a change for whatever reason. And Sydney, he thought, would be the best fit for him. So I think if that had have happened in 2009, 2010, we would have found it really hard to deal with as a side. But we were so strong and we never really relied upon one player, albeit, he was arguably the best player in the league. We still felt that our system and our group as a whole was strong enough to cover him. So for me, it was more about, him being happy in a new environment, not necessarily there wasn't any angst or there wasn't any resentment to say that you should be staying with us because you can help us become more successful. It was, purely just looking after him and seeing where he was happy and where he wanted to play his football. And we got one back on him in 2014. So maybe he wanted to reconsider the move.
Yeah, that definitely, of course, is interesting, and hopefully he gets back and plays some great football in 2021.
Yeah, you're right. And I think we saw the emergence of some Sydney players, especially some young Sydney players who you can see is their future. So for them to get the opportunity, not only to train with Buddy, but certainly to play with him and say, like I'm saying right now, that they had the opportunity to run out alongside him, that would give them the world of confidence. But yeah, it felt like in what was an unusual year, the Stars still provided that moment for us to sit back and admire what they're able to do. And unfortunately for this year and part of last year as well, we're not able to see that from him.
Yeah, definitely could not agree more. So in 2014, you played your 200th AFL match. You won your third premiership at the Hawthorn Football Club. You won the best and fairest, and you were part of the All-Australian team. Would have that been arguably your best season on an individual but also a team level?
Yeah, and I got married too. So that was just the cherry on top, I suppose. After everything had happened, it was. I suppose it was probably the only. I mean, I came into the AFL system as a midfielder, as an inside midfielder. You know, I was probably 92 kilos, so there wasn't too much outside run that I could provide. But throughout my whole career, I've played a variety of different positions because I've been adaptable and accepting of the role that I've been given, I suppose. And 2014, because there was injuries to key players, and one being Sam Mitchell, the invitation or the spot that really opened up to play predominantly midfield was there for me in 2014. And I just really relished the opportunity, understood that, you know, with a key player out, for us to still be successful at the end of the year, that I had to perform. And it just so happened that, I mean, I've always had the ability to find the ball. So to be in the midfield, and I suppose the way the game is played these days, you do have a chance to get a high accumulation of possessions, but also being able to use it. And it sort of worked out. Like, you need a bit of luck. You need to get through the year without injury. And you need to have the team playing well for you to play well. And everything just sort of flowed. So the only thing that was probably missing was a Norm Smith that Hodgie stole off me.
Yeah, I could not agree more with you. So I'm guessing you played in 4 premierships. That must have been a great thrill.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, from my early days, you know, growing up in Warrnambool, and going to home and away season games, but certainly the grand finals were massive occasions back then. Whether it be District League or Hampden League, there would, the night before the game, there'd be cars lined up outside the street to get a park on the oval. And for me, they were memories that just don't leave you. And then also when the AFL grand final came around, we would always go to friends' houses, and it would be a big occasion. So for me to be able to play in that day, that, you know, a young kid from Warrnambool growing up as a 10, 12-year-old, Melbourne for me seemed an eternity away. So for me to actually realise that dream, I suppose, to one, playing one, but then two, look back on my career and be very privileged and honoured to play in 4 premierships and be a part of a really successful period for the Hawthorn Football Club. It's beyond my wildest dreams, to be honest, Fletch.
Yeah, you definitely did have a great career. What was going through your mind when you were traded to Melbourne at the end of the 2016 season?
It was a bit of a whirlwind couple of weeks. I just come second in the best and fairest. I came off a pretty consistent year. We lost both finals, so we're top 4 side, but we bowed out in straight sets. So you would still think that the group was there to potentially have some success in the following couple of seasons, and then to be given the option, I suppose, to look elsewhere. Was a bit of a surprise, but one that I truly look back on and am quite happy that I made that decision and was offered that decision to get to a new environment, to a team that I thought would have success around the corner, you know, and to play in a prelim final with them and help them get back to finals, I suppose, for the first time in 12 years, for me was a good challenge. And, you know, I met a whole bunch of new people, saw a different system work. So for me, from a football point of view, it just broadened my knowledge, I suppose. I'm not one to sit back and moan and say, why me? I'm always about, well, they're the cards that you've been dealt. Let's move on to a new environment and see what we can do.
Yeah, you definitely did bring some great experience to the Melbourne Football Club. What was it like being coached by Simon Goodwin?
Yeah, it was good. The first year that I was there was the year that he took over from Paul Roos. So he was, you know, fresh out of the wrapper as well to be in that head coaching position. So it was fun to be around, to be honest, because you got this young coach coming in with no real pressure, I suppose, and to be able to see his way of coaching, to see his philosophy, and try and help impart my knowledge in terms of, you know, my experiences into the way that he coached was good. And, you know, we missed out by the barest of margins in finals that year, and then to then back that up by the year that we had in 2018. Yeah, it seemed like everything was going the right direction, and there's been a couple of lean years since. So this is where you see, I suppose, if someone can really coach or not. Can they adapt to the current environment? Can they change a few things in their game plan? Can they get everyone on the same page to be playing better football?
Yeah, you definitely were lucky to be coached by Simon Goodwin. So this is going to be a bit of a difficult question, but who would have been the top 5 opposition players that you would have got to play against during your career?
Ooh, so I think, from the early days in my career, I always remember Mark Rasciuto. He was, for me, he was everything that I sort of wanted to be as a footballer. Tough, hard, relentless, great leadership, could go forward, take an overhead mark, kick goals. I just thought he was an extraordinary player. Andrew McLeod was the Rolls Royce when I was entering the system. He was, just such a polished player. I've tagged multiple players. I've tagged, Simon Black. He's probably the hardest person that I've played on in terms of just being able to, try and nullify his influence. I've played on Chris Judd. You can't go past Gary Ablett Jr. There's a whole heap. And then I was quite fortunate enough to play with what I think some of the great players in Hodge, Mitchell, Franklin, Rioli.
Yeah, you definitely were lucky. Rasciuto, McLeod, and Simon Black, Chris Judd, and Gary Ablett Jr. definitely are some of the greatest AFL players of all time. Did you always want to get into media post-football?
I wasn't really sure, to be honest, Fletch. I think I always wanted to stay in football. So whatever that may have been. And I started in 2014, I think it was, with AFL 360. And I suppose that gave me a bit of I was never shy. I always felt comfortable doing it. And I think I try to articulate what I'm seeing in the most simplest of forms to try and help the viewer, I suppose, understand what's going on out on the field. And, as the 360 stuff rolled around, and then I did a few games on radio, and then I was fortunate enough with Player Takeover Round to do a few games with Fox, and I quite enjoyed it. I think I can see the game quite well. And then I suppose what the media does give me, it gives me a chance to stay in football, but also being at home a lot of the time to help with the young family. So for me, it was probably the right balance at this point in my life, I suppose. But I think there's still that itch to get back into clubland and potentially maybe coach one day.
Yeah, you definitely are lucky to work in the AFL media. So did you ever participate in any relaxation techniques before an AFL match, like mindfulness?
Yeah, so it was probably about 2017 where that came into Melbourne, and Simon Goodwin was a big believer in it. From my own personal point of view, I didn't think like it helped me at all. I'm a pretty relaxed sort of person, so I could be joking with a teammate right up until the first bounce, and then I've just got the ability to switch on straight away. It never really, I never really had to do anything to help me switch on. I can switch on straight away. I've got no issues with that, from a joking manner to. So, but then in the lead up to the game, I was always quite relaxed anyway. And I'm a bit sort of fidgety too. I hate sitting still for a period of time as well. So I like to be up and about, moving around, and just sort of, not being anchored there. So for me, it didn't necessarily work for myself or benefit me, but certainly I think the way the clubs are going and the way that players are able to center themselves and relax for that period of time before the game starts has become more prevalent.
Yeah, definitely is a great part of the game at the moment. So, of course, you were part of the three-peat at Hawthorn. Would have the three-peat at Hawthorn from 2013 to 2015 team have been better than the three-peat team of the Brisbane Lions from 2001 to 2003.
Oh, do you know what? I think, my personal opinion, I think they would have got us. I think they were just, I mean, they were probably the physique of players, I suppose, from the early 2000s to when we were successful in that period had completely changed. The athlete was completely different. So, I mean, if you took our forward line, Ruffhead and Franklin, good, but then, you're going up against Lepage and Mel Michael and, these guys who were men. But the way the athlete was, I suppose, built when we were playing was much slimmer, more aerobic and dynamic. So two completely different sides. But I think, you look through their side, Voss, Lappin, Ackermanis, Jonathan Brown, Nigel Lappin, Sean Hart. For me, that was they would probably just get us.
Yeah, it was a difficult question, but I just thought I'd ask it anyway.
Who do you think would win?
Look, because I'm younger and I didn't see Brisbane play, I'd have to say Hawthorn based on some of the great players that you had. Like yourself, you had Hodge, Mitchell, Ruffhead, Buddy Franklin, Cyril Rioli. I think that personally, because I grew up in that era and I was watching them, I would relate more to the Hawthorn Football Club.
Yeah.
So I guess, who are some of the lifelong friends that you have made from working in the media and working as an AFL player?
Yeah, so my best mate is Ruffy. He was the best man at my wedding, and I was the best man at his wedding. So we've created a really special bond that now our families holiday together, and we're really quite close. Buddy and I are still really close. We don't see each other all that often because he's up in Sydney, but we would talk regularly. And the same goes for a lot of players. Luke Hodge is exactly the same because he lives in Brisbane. We don't cross paths a lot, but we would talk regularly. I was on the phone to Ben Stratton today. Who else? Josh Gibson. Great. It's funny, when you leave a football club, it feels like if you don't see someone for a period of time or don't talk to them, but then when you see them, it feels like yesterday that you're in that environment where you saw them every day. So we've got a few WhatsApp groups. We've got a 2008 premiership WhatsApp group. And then I've got a WhatsApp group with a lot of the other Hawthorn players. So that's probably the mode of communication, because we can't necessarily catch up all the time. But that's why it's good winning premierships, because you get to catch up every so often and enjoy each other's company, no matter where you come from around Australia.
Yeah, that definitely is an important part of the competition. So I guess Hawthorn currently has the oldest list in the competition. What are your thoughts about Alistair Clarkson still being the coach of the Hawthorn Football Club? And do you think he's the right man for the rebuild?
Yeah, I think he's the right person for the rebuild. I think if you take it on his experience and what he's been able to do, he understands the game. He understands how to build a list. And I think I've said this previously, that you've just got to find if he's got the energy to do it. Because I think if we look at the Hawthorn side, and as you just mentioned, then they're certainly getting older. It doesn't look like they've got a lot of young talent coming through. And I think if you look at the history of the game, it suggests that you need a good base, and that base usually comes from high-end talent, and whether that's through early picks or getting good young players into your side. And it does, for me, it just doesn't seem like it's like that at the moment. So they're in a really tough position. They really are. It's, which direction do you go in? Do you keep trying to top up, with experienced players from other clubs that either cost you draft picks outgoing, or they cost you a lot of money? So Geelong have been able to do it really well, but they've got, one of the greatest players I think that we've ever seen in Patrick Dangerfield. So I think there's been other players, but he's kept them right up the top. And now we're seeing them, maybe acquiring a few more players. So they've been lucky in a sense. Probably the only team that has bucked the trend, I suppose, that hasn't really bottomed out and had to get draft picks to build themselves up. So they're in a fascinating position because they've traded out a lot of draft picks over the past few years. and they're one of the oldest lists in the competition.
Yeah, definitely will be interesting to see how they go. Would have there been a favourite post AFL season footy trip during your career that you can remember?
It probably wasn't I mean, early days, it was probably the thing that you did after the first year. We'd go to Thailand. For me, who has never been overseas before, that was quite exciting. Just seeing a different culture and a different way of living and experiencing that with 15 other young kids. My most favourite post-season trip was after I got married to go to Europe. I'd never been to Europe before, and I just fell in love with, France and Italy in particular. And I just can't wait to get back, to be honest. I've done a lot of trips to America, been to New York 3 or 4 times, love New York, and just being exposed to Europe. For me, that was where I fell in love with wine. And that for me was a sort of a changing point, I suppose.
Yeah, it definitely is great to travel, and hopefully we can all get back to traveling very soon once COVID-19 is over. I guess, what are your interests and hobbies other than traveling outside of football?
Yeah, I mean, probably the specific, the one that consumes a bit of my time is my wine business that I've got. So I've got a wine business with 3 other mates, and that's just producing wine out of the Yarra Valley and Mornington Peninsula. So we really enjoy that. That's a hobby turned into a business and a passion. I enjoy golf. I enjoy tennis. Those types of things. And then 3 young kids and a family. There's not a whole lot of spare time to throw around. So if it's not spending time with my family, it's pretty much stuff to do with the wine business or being involved in football. So once the little tackers get to school, maybe I'll have more time to play some golf or some tennis.
Yeah, definitely has been an interesting life outside of football for you. What has it been like handling 3 young kids during lockdown?
Yeah, it's pretty hectic. I suppose our boys went back 3 weeks ago to daycare in kinder. So once they were out of the house and we got a day to sort of just sit back and enjoy our own company, it's probably then you realise how difficult it was and how consuming it was to have 3 boys, and they're pretty active boys. I can tell you, they don't sit down and do too many pictures or paintings. They want to be outside and playing ball sports and all types of things. So yeah, I wouldn't leave the house some days, and I'd look at my Apple Watch and I'd do 15, 16 kilometres just by being in the backyard and following them around and playing sports. So but then on the other side of that, you just get a chance to see them grow together. They spend a lot of time together, and I'm sort of lucky my wife's a primary school teacher, so there was an element of the morning that was dedicated to education, and then they were mine for PE class.
Yeah, definitely would be great. Do you see all 3 of your sons hopefully playing for Hawthorn in the future?
Yeah, you never know. It's funny, you don't push anything upon any of your kids. You sort of try and see the path that they've taken. But my eldest, Freddie, he's totally obsessed with footy. He enjoyed the footy tipping throughout the year. On a Monday morning, he'd knock on my door at 6:30, 7 o'clock, wanting to see the results, and then wanting to tip for the next week. And any opportunity he gets, he goes outside and wants to kick the footy. So it's funny that he's been exposed to it a little bit, I suppose. But we certainly haven't rammed it down his throat. But he's totally obsessed with it.
That definitely is great. So thank you very much, Jordan Lewis, for joining us on the Footy with Fletch podcast. It was great to talk to you.
No worries. Absolute pleasure. And sorry for being a little bit late.
That is all good. You are a very busy man. So thank you very much.
Good on you. Thank you. Take care.
So thank you to everyone for joining us in season 1 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. It has been fantastic to interview some great guests, and I want to say a very big thank you to Jordan Lewis for agreeing to be on the podcast. So have a great grand final day, and we will be back in 2021 with season 2 of the Footy with Fletch podcast. Goodbye for now.